If I had to wager a guess, I bet you've never asked yourself some of the following. What am I doing wrong in my business? What assumptions am I making that are bad? Is this all headed somewhere? And do I know where that somewhere is? I am Melissa Franks, your On-Call COO, and this is the Opt-In podcast where we go from surviving to thriving in business. And if you are a small business owner, I bet if I asked you right now, you would tell me exactly what your revenue target is for 2025. I also bet that you could tell me with clarity what is holding your business back. And I also bet you that you're wrong. That's right, you're wrong. You see, I work with businesses of all sizes. I have clients that are just under the $1 million mark, all the way up to 8-figure businesses, and I have spent a whole bunch of time in 9-figure businesses and billion-dollar companies. And what is really, really interesting is that owners and CEOs really start to get disconnected and start to make assumptions that can be invalidated with a little bit of research. And so today we are going to talk about the mistakes that 7-figure business owners make. Did I say that? I sure did. Now, if you are working inside of a 7-figure business, stay here because you can potentially help the owner, the CEO, the leader of the business identify some of these blind spots. What is really, really interesting, and I think that some of you have probably heard me say this before, is that businesses absolutely have maturity cycles. And there is, depending on your type of business, there are a lot of models out there that you can look at. Startups have a slightly different one than a traditional small business. However, in my frame of reference and the worldview that I have, when you are going from 0 to $1 million, that's the trial and error phase. You really lack consistency. There's a whole bunch of chaos. You can't really see trends and what's working. And then when you hit $1 million, you have figured a few things out. And you know where you want to pour gas on the fire, and you know where maybe you're going to just let it ride and see what happens. By the time you get to 3 million, you have a grown business. You know what works. You know what you're selling. You know who you're serving. And you can repeat outcomes over and over and over again in your business. 3 million is like this magic spot where you actually feel pretty good. You're not concerned about your bank account balance, generally speaking. Some of you are. We could talk about that later. And you're not concerned where the next client or sale is going to come from because you know how to generate that. However, you start to become a little bit separated from what's happening in the business. And this is where things can get a little squirrely. The road from 3 to 5 million and then staying at 5 million and above is incredibly treacherous. There are many, many, many people that hit the $1 million mark and they stay there forever because they kind of like the experimentation and the chaos and they like to adjust and shift stuff up. There are also many, many businesses that say at 3 million forever and ever and ever because they don't iterate, they don't look for growth opportunities, and they just keep doing what works. And I want to go on record as saying right now, all of that is okay. This is not the place to come if you want somebody to cheerleader and rah-rah you into becoming $1 billion business every single time. If you want that, I want that for you, and we can do some of that here also. What the purpose of this podcast is to help you, the business owner or the person that works inside of the business, get clarity on what your work, your profession is going to enable in your life. And so if you are somebody who has a business and it's a $1.5 million business and it enables the life that you want, fan-freaking-tastic. Goal achieved, check the box, keep going, right? Stay the course. If, however, you're somebody that wants more and you don't know exactly what the end game is, you just know that you're not there yet, that's okay too. I just want to recognize before we go any further and talk about the mistakes that business owners can make that we acknowledge that where you are, if it is serving you and you are happy and it's your end game, stay there. Stay there. Now, with that said, you can learn from some of these lessons. So the very first lesson is you do not need a massive team. I know 3 million seems like a lot. I know it does. I know 4 million seems like a lot. And the biggest expense inside of a business, the biggest expense is payroll. Always. And you know what? It's the hardest thing to adjust. When you start hiring employees, it gets incredibly difficult to let go of an employee because there is employment law that you need to consider. In addition, when you start hiring people, you have really unglamorous things like Social Security tax and unemployment tax, and you have insurance you have to pay for. You have a lot of expense, and goodness gracious, if you provide health benefits or 401k or maternity leave or any of those things, having employees is incredibly expensive on the business. So you want to hire judiciously. The $3 million mark, you want to hire with the maximum output a person can get, which means you're not hiring executives. I know, and it's going to roll into the next thing that is a problem inside of these businesses. You do not need executives as employees in your business. You can absolutely get fractional support. You can absolutely go into masterminds where you can rub elbows with them. At this point, you are the executive. You don't need any more. So one of the very first big mistakes is that businesses of this size hire too many people. You just expand your team too fast. You're already seeing we've got here, we can go there, this is what we need to do, I want to work less and all the things. And before you know it, you go from one person or two people to 7 or 8 or 9, and the overhead and the expense is killing your profit margin. It's killing it. You can't reinvest in your business because you have all of this overhead. And then what ends up happening over time is I watch these business owners get incredibly stressed out by their fixed expense baseline. That's what starts to drive all of the activity in the business. I need to offset this absolute have to pay this fixed expense, which is payroll every month. So I'm going to do anything. And that's where desperation sets in, and that's where crazy decisions are made in the business. So the very first thing that goes wrong in a business is hiring too many employees. Okay. Number 2, hiring the wrong level of employee. And these two go hand in hand. I cannot tell you how many small businesses I have walked into in the 7-figure club where almost everybody has a chief of something in their title. Even many of these people have a director of something in their title. And let's be clear on a couple of things. People that are qualified for that roles are incredibly expensive. People that are qualified to be a chief of something, think, not do. Generally speaking, I'm a unicorn. I think and I do. People that are a director think, just not as visionary as the people that have the chief in their title, and they rarely do. Managers are where you start to see an equal balance between managing and working and actually producing output. And so what happens is when you get into these businesses, you either have people with these flashy chief of whatever titles, and they're actually managers or maybe specialists. So their skill set and their delivery does not match the title, which also means their income doesn't match the title. So let's say that a COO for a small business with bonus and all the stuff should be making $500,000 a year. And you have a COO in your business and that person's making $80,000 a year. You know what you don't have? A COO. You know what you do have? An operations manager. So this can become a really big problem because if your operations manager is actually being called a COO, when you get to 5 million and 7 million and you need an operations director or you need a fractional COO or you need any of those things, you either have a really difficult conversation with your employee, which makes them a flight risk, or you struggle because the person in that role can't do the job. So that second thing is that there are overinflated job titles, which really start to cause a problem, both from an identity perspective and an expectation perspective. And because you don't know what those jobs do, because you haven't done them, you're a business owner. You didn't start the business to run the business. So you don't actually know what all these disciplines are supposed to do. When there start to become gaps that are present, you're looking for additional help, and then you will overspend to compensate for the lack of skill and ability that the person has that's sitting in the role. So first is you grow your team too fast. Second is that you have titles that are misaligned to actually what you need and the skill set of the person in the role. The third mistake that 7-figure businesses do is they solve problems that they do not have. I said what I said. You're solving problems you don't have. What starts to happen is that as your team gets bigger, as income gets steady, as the stress of is this viable or not starts to reduce, you as the business owner have more time to be visionary and think. So you're spending all of your time thinking big and like in the future and et cetera, et cetera. And when you do that, sometimes you will catastrophize a little bit. Sometimes you get hyper focused on one piece of feedback. Sometimes you start connecting dots where dots don't need to be connected. And what that can do and what that can lead to is a lot of energy around developing a solution for something that doesn't actually exist. I recently was working with a 7-figure client, and as we were talking through the business model, what we realized was the problem that was causing literally sleepless nights, the problem that was subsuming all of the owner's time, so they weren't focused on anything else, was actually a problem that wouldn't be felt until they were an 8-figure business. And it was because there was one piece of feedback from one person that said it would be really great if there was more direct access to X. I don't want to give away what the business was. One person said that. And in the spiral around that request, this complex solution started to emerge. And when we actually talked about it, there was no reason for it. There wasn't demand. There wasn't a huge cry and call to action from anybody. It was just, I need to solve this problem. I need to become, this is an issue. And there was a lot of drama around the situation when there was no data. So what you really need to start looking out for is that as you start to get feedback and as you start to have other coaches and as you start to meet other professionals, they're going to start throwing their opinions on your business, solicited and unsolicited. And they will tap in to some of your subconscious concerns, because we all have anxiety about our business. And what will happen is you will start to on that in your brain. And then all of a sudden, it becomes a hurricane of problem when it didn't actually exist. So stop trying to solve problems that aren't there yet. If you identify a problem, ask yourself, how do I know? How do I know this is a problem? How do I know? How do I measure how significant that is? And if you can't prove that it is in fact a problem, then you do not have full stop. The next thing that happens with 7-figure businesses is you decide to start another business. You do. You have a business that's successful and is running and is making money and has a team and it's all the stuff and it's a little boring. And all of a sudden you have another great idea and you chase it and you start working on the business and you're not paying attention to this business over here because you've got this new business over here and you're like, everybody says to have 7 streams of income and diversify and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, this is a big mistake. Huge mistake. In fact, I don't advise anybody to start thinking about a second business until that first business has 5 years of 8-figure revenue. Yeah, 5 years. Here's the thing about 7-figure businesses. They're still really susceptible to the market climate and the economic landscape. They just are. Consumers are really, really fickle, and the tide can turn in an instant. One of the best examples of this, I'm just waiting for it to happen, is the coaching industry. And if you don't know what that is, good for you, because you've trained your algorithm not to feed you coaches. But there is this massive industry out there. I would love to get my arms around the actual size. And it's humans that are either life coaches or online business coaches or sales coaches or marketing coaches or advertising coaches or fitness coaches and influencers. There is a coach for every aspect of divorce coaches. There is a coach out there for you based on any sort of predilection in your life. And this coaching industry has just mushroomed because of the advance of the internet and everybody that has had some life experience with something or maybe has gone to get some certification from somebody where I'm not even sure how you get certified for that because is it real? How did they develop a certification if they self-coined themselves a life coach, for example? But anyway, this coaching business has become this massive thing and I keep waiting for it to implode. Because all that it is it's a bunch of experts that had domain expertise in one specific vertical, and they've now monetized their thoughts and opinions. And I see a lot of those business owners hit 7 figures and then start doing something else. They just do. They're coaches and then they have an online course, or they're coaches and then they start like writing books, or they're coaches and they like go into like multiple types of coaching and verticals, and they start to like add all of these limbs to their business, and then everything starts to fail. So for those of you, whether you're a coach or not, quite honestly, because this is not me shitting on coaches, just to be really clear, it's just an industry where I see a lot of overlap and cannibalism and widely varying levels of expertise. Let's just put it that way. But if is also a very valuable resource for those that are qualified to be coaches. And I pay coaches a lot of money. I have in the past. And so I see the value in them. So again, not shitting on them. It was just an example that I gave. All of that to say, in all of the experience that I have with all different industries, currently my client basis spans from education to e-commerce. Like, we're all over the place. And what I can say very emphatically is that until you have been in that 8-figure club for 5 years, and solidly in that 8-figure club for 5 years, you should not and have no business trying to create and open other businesses. You just shouldn't. You're going to get distracted. And when you're distracted, that business stops growing. That 7-figure business that you have that's steadily growing stops growing as soon as you get distracted on starting a new one. And the reason that a lot of you start these businesses, these second businesses and these third businesses, is because that first business is boring, and it's boring by design. There's a bunch of people out there on the internet that say boring builds billions. And it's kind of true. What you want is a boring business, because a boring business is predictable. A boring business is stable. A boring business is something where you have a lot of data and you can tweak and direct and do all of the things. The reason you're starting another business before you should is because you want the dopamine hit. You want the high of testing and failing and winning and like doing it again. Can I be a serial entrepreneur? Do I have what it takes to grow, take an idea and grow it to 7 or 8 figures? Like, you love that Jones and that high, and like, cool. And if you want to do that, then my recommendation, strongly and with love, is for you to sell that first $7 million business and go do it again. If you are trying to grow a $7 million business or a 7-figure business into an 8-figure business, if you are trying to grow a 7-figure business to an 8-figure business, you cannot simultaneously take an idea and try to grow it to the 7-figure club. You will fail. And you know what will suffer is the 7-figure business, because all of your energy and focus and intention is going to go to that thing you're trying to build for the first time. I'm not telling you not to. What I am advising you to do is, if that's really what you want to do, is you want to build businesses. That's what you want to do. You want to have an idea and you want to launch it in the world. Then you actually start selling and exiting the things that are profitable. That'll fund your business building fund. Heck, it might even fund your lifestyle, and then you get to go play. But don't get yourself into, I need to own this portfolio of companies and I'm going to manage and steer these things all on my own. Because the reality is that you didn't start businesses to build. You didn't start businesses to run businesses. So if you didn't start that very first business because all you wanted to do was run a business, then you are not the person to own a portfolio of companies. Okay, now my next mistake is that business owners think that they're the CEO. Oh, I'm going to light the world on fire with this one. CEOs run businesses. They're administrative roles. CEOs get up in the morning and they're like, I am lit up by making sure that this thing runs and operates and is profitable. In some very rare cases, hello, Steve Jobs. They are visionaries. And they are product developers. And they are both the ones that administratively want to run the business and sit in the clouds and do innovative breakthrough things. The average human is not Steve Jobs. I just want to be really, really clear. And the thing is that if you look at the organization below Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or any of these men and women that have built businesses out of nothing, they all have administrators below them that actually run the day to day. So a big mistake that business owners make is calling themselves a CEO. Just don't do it. Like, if you do not have like fire in your belly to run the business, like the boring stuff, to sit with the CFO and like look at the finances and get excited about the P&L and stare at org charts and do performance reviews and all of the nits and gnats to make sure the business is efficient and the processes are running. Like if that does not light you up, and I just have a hunch that it does not, because you started a business not to run the business. If that doesn't light you up, don't call yourself a CEO. You're a founder, right? You are the creative director. You are the chief in charge of product. You're the business owner. You're not the freaking CEO. This is something that is probably the one thing that is the biggest pet peeve of my life, is that business owners call themselves a CEO when they actually are not, and they don't do the work. Now, here is the cool thing. And the reality, friends, is that the COO actually runs the business. They do, because they're the number two. The way that CEOs and COOs work is that the COO is a chameleon and is the exact counterpoint to all of the weaknesses of the CEO. Fact. No two COO job descriptions are the same. If the CEO changes, often the COO does, because they're no longer complementary. It is very rare that they stay intact. And that is not something that anybody talks about, by the way. The COO, however, is responsible for the overall operations and how the business runs. Innovation, product development, that always sits with the CEO, right? Or the CEO's office. But when I said that you're not the CEO of your small business, it's because you're not doing administrative tasks. When I say that innovation and product development sit with the CEO, they're still running the functions. They're not the visionary. So if you hate running your business, it's okay. Hire somebody to do it for you. You do not have to be the CEO. You don't. All right, so that is another massive, massive mistake. Let's see. Another big mistake is that when you're in the 7-figure space, you haven't realized that you have something that works. Now, this one is really, really interesting, because there are a lot of people that are making 7 figures and they can't get themselves out of that 0 to 1 million hamster wheel. So they are constantly innovating. They're constantly touching something. They're constantly refining. And this is a huge mistake. Once you get into the 7-figure club, you have something that works. You have something that sells. You have something that converts. You have things that people want. And now you just let it be. And don't start adding things. Like, have you ever watched somebody decorate a cake, like a professional cake decorator? And it's the actual cake itself and like the filling, and then they put like the base layer around it, and there's like this whole methodical process and like whatever, right? And then they decorate however they're gonna decorate. A professional decorator has a plan, they execute, they leave it alone. Have you ever tried to decorate a cake with a child? You have the plan, you bake the cake, you at least do like some sort of base layer of icing, or you try to, depending on the helper of the children. And then you're like, here's the plan, just a little bit of sprinkles. And the next thing you know, you have an entire jar of sprinkles on a corner of the cake. And then they're like, but I need that glitter sugar too. And that's on another corner of the cake. And then they're like, I want to write some stuff. So now they're trying to write on top of the sprinkles. And before you know it, your entire kitchen counter and floor and maybe animals are covered in sprinkles and glitter. And somehow there's icing on the ceiling and you can't see the cake anymore. That's what you're doing to your business when you keep adding just one more thing. Ooh, we can surprise and delight them with this thing. Or, ooh, let's just do this one other thing. Or, ooh, let's like do this. And before you know it, you have this cake that's over-decorated, the entire environment around you is a disaster, and nobody wants to eat it. That's what happens when you get to 7 figures and then you keep adding more. Don't do it. Just let the thing that's working work for like 6 months. And then if things start to stagnate or stall, or you're getting feedback and you need to make an iteration, iterate. I am not telling you not to iterate, but there is a big difference between that decorating analogy that I just gave you and iteration. And here is what I mean. When you're iterating, following the exact same scenario, what you are doing is you have this entire disaster and mess, right? And then you're like, there was too many decorations. So you go through the entire process all over again, and you tell the kids one type of sprinkle, right? You still have frosting on the ceiling, maybe, you still have stuff all over the floor, but you've made one change. And that's what iteration is. And then you serve it to the people. And what's the feedback? The cake was inedible the first time, right? So like, how is it better now? And then you keep iterating. And that's the refinement period of 7 to 8 figures. It's not just one more thing and one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. No, 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 no. It's let it ride for 6 months. Observe, gather feedback, look at the data, determine, are we good? And if we're not good, what's the small change that we're going to make? You are overcomplicating your business and putting it at risk by keeping your hands and touching it all the time. Okay. I could literally talk to you for the next 3 hours about all of the mistakes, but these are the big ones. And so if you are coming up against any of them, my recommendation is the following. And I just recommended that somebody do this literally today, so it's top of mind. I want you in a quiet moment, wherever that is for you. Some of you are early risers and it is a 5 a.m. situation. Some of you stay up late after everybody else and it's a midnight situation. Some of you are a little bit like me, where sometimes the only quiet you get is sitting in your car in the driveway before the children realize that you're home. You pick your quiet. And in that quiet, answer the following question. What does my business and my life look like in 5 years? And when I am interviewed by fill in the blank, Oprah, Katie Couric, you're on The View, fill in the blank. When I am interviewed by them, this is how I describe my business and this is how I describe my life. And take the time, take 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I don't know, and write it down. And as finite detail as possible. Build the picture. Be specific about what your business does and doesn't do, who your business serves and doesn't serve. Be specific around where you live and how you spend your time and who you're with. Be specific. And then, when you are making any decisions related to your business, go back to that and ask yourself, if I do this thing that I am considering, is it going to get me one step closer to there? And that will provide you clarity. That becomes your North Star. That becomes the end game. Often, we are sprinting with no destination in mind. And here is the thing. If you are running a race and you are running full out and you don't realize it's not a 100-meter dash, but it is a marathon, you're never going to make it. So do this exercise, find your North Star, use it to make decisions. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I love talking to all of you every week, and I am just now starting a new series on YouTube only for now. It's going to be paired with a newsletter, and it's going to be all about what is happening, current events, business landscape, government, politics, etc., through the lens of business. So what you are going to get from me is that small business expert view of, should I care about this? Why should I care about it? What's happening? Explain it to me so I can understand. That is going to be launching on YouTube. By the time you hear this, the very first one will be out about efficiency and the Department of Government Efficiency and Elon Musk and do I care and what is happening. And spoiler alert, I've done exactly what Elon's doing before. So I've got his number. Until either we meet again here or over on YouTube, please know that you are wise, you are strong, you are capable, and I believe in you.